Hello. What do I look for in a fantasy role-playing game? Tabletop role-playing game. Well, I mean, I started with Dungeons and Dragons, as everybody knows, and I've played it in its different iterations, and I've enjoyed it. But I think Dungeons and Dragons, including the system, is good for Dungeons and Dragons. So it's good for Forgotten Realms, and the setting is specifically designed for it. So when I'm looking for a fantasy role-playing game, I'm looking for something that's going to more suit my sensibilities. Whereas Dungeons and Dragons is kind of heroic high fantasy, and I'm sort of more into kind of the low key fantasy. So sort of low key magic. There's maybe just a few races to choose from. Because for me, it's all about the setting and the character. So I want to tell a good story. That's probably why I like Game of Thrones so much. Yes, including season 8. That's probably why I like Game of Thrones so much, because it's the fact it's got all the elements that I love about fantasy, but it's all very low key. It could almost be historical. There's a TV show from the 1980s called Robin of Sherwood, and from HTV, and with Michael Parade and Jason Connery, and I love that show. It is my favourite television show. It's absolutely fantastic because it's pseudo-historical. Well, it's historical for a start. It's pseudo-historical because obviously they've messed around a little bit to make it a little bit more fantastical. And it's got lots of low-key magic. So you've got these amazing, wonderful characters, which I love dearly. And then you've got this underlying level of mysticism and magic and paganism. And all based on, on what was around at the time and those pagan beliefs with Herne the Hunter and what have you. And I love that. That's my kind of fantasy. I mean, you chuck in a couple of elves, maybe a dwarf or two, then, top billing, I absolutely adore that. I think that's probably because I'm British, from England, so I come from a little city called Lichfield, which has got lots of history going back like hundreds of years, well, more than 1,000 years. So even before the Norman conquest, going back to the Dark Ages. And so all around where I used to live, there's castles and there's ruins and there's Iron Age forts and there's old Roman ruins and all sorts. So I kind of grew up with that. So I grew up in the reality of that, and I think that's what I love. There's a game that came out in the 80s which almost passed me by because I was playing a lot of fighting fantasy, which was Dragon Warriors. I've got it down there. I bought the reprint when Magnus Opus did it, and actually it's it's the only tabletop role playing game for which I own every single published piece of official work, including the free RPG booklet, which a bunch of us had to club together and get them sent over from America. Originals, not reprints. I've even got the White Dwarf articles with the Dragon Warriors adventures and articles in. But I love that because it's low key. So it's still fantastical in many respects. I say it's low key. It's got about 1 million pages of spells, but it keeps everything kind of almost suits. Again, I'll use that term, pseudo historical. So there is like a historical bent to it, so you can actually feel the reality to it. But of course, it's got elves and strange creatures in the woods. And the thing I love about it is because it feels very British. It's very, like I say, it's low key. There's a level of cynicism to it, 80s cynicism, which I found prevalent in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. That kind of punk humour, very sort of dark, irreverent humour that you got in the 80s, and this sense of despair because it was the 1980s and things weren't great in the UK at that point. And yeah, I just love it. That speaks to me. I was a teenager in the 80s, so of course I was an impressionable youth, and those kind of games speak to me. But if you, like I say, if you gave me a system and it was all human characters and you could only play human characters, I'm well down for it. I do enjoy my games, my heroic adventure games, where you can have like a choice of 1 million species or races or kins or whatever they call them. Ancestries, that's it. I like that term actually. Ancestries is a very good term. Oh, heritages, actually, that's another good term as well. So they call them races, which is a little bit strange. But yeah, I mean, I do enjoy those games because the fun. It's high action. I've had some good fun with 5th edition. I had a lot of fun with 4th edition, actually. 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I know lots of people sort of don't like it, and I understand why. To be honest with you, it was more of a miniatures game than it was a tabletop role playing game. But I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it was really good. There's some fantastic artwork. They really managed to sort of evoke this dynamic high adventure setting. Whereas my sort of preferred ones are the ones that are grim and everybody dresses in miserable clothes from the Dark Ages. In fact, I am going to show you the cover actually to Dragon Warriors. It's the John Hodgson cover. It's not going to be great, but I'll add a link. You can get this from Drive Through RPG. Actually, everything's this. I think Dragon Warriors rulebook is pay what you want, and I think you can probably get a hardback rulebook like this for about 15-20 quid, and it's all freshly printed, and it's an excellent book. And but look at the artwork on the front of that. That's the kind of artwork that it's just a bunch of regular humans. To be fair, you can only really play regular humans in Dragon Warriors. There are options to play elves and dwarves if you want to, but I like it that way because what I want is characters, and if your character is defined by the race that you're playing, then you're not really playing a character. You're just playing a stereotype of an archetype, and so I'm not saying you can't do that if you're playing a different race. But that's just what I prefer. That's just how I approach games. And as sad as it sounds, when I do play games, whether it's on the computer if I'm playing an MMO or if I'm playing a tabletop role-playing game, I tend to play a human fighter. And that's because I feel that if I played a character like an elf or a dwarf or a tiefling or what have you, I would become part of the fantasy. I'd be part of that world, and I'd be sort of, I don't know, I wouldn't be a spectator. And I like to experience fantasy worlds through a character that I can kind of relate to. I don't know what it's like to be an immortal elf. I don't know what it's like to be a stout dwarf. I don't know what it's like to be a possessed tiefling or demonic tiefling or a really hardened dragonborn. I don't know what that's like, but I do know what it's like to be a human, and I do know what it's like to be a human who's bewildered and shocked and amazed by the things that they discover. And that's what I like to try and emulate when I create characters for fantasy role-playing games. It's just going to be something nice and simple, who's like going out into the world and dealing with it. So too long didn't listen. I like fantasy role-playing games which are low-key, with few races and with a kind of a dark world, not grim. I've played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay for a very long time, and grim can be fun in that kind of weird sort of dour way, but kind of had enough of that now. And I want to go back to what I loved about fantasy in the first place, which was Robin of Sherwood. I want to go back to those quirky, fun character groups going out and having adventures and relying on each other in a bond of fellowship. I just love that sort of stuff. I will be making a video about me and Tolkien. I didn't know the guy, but his setting and influenced my role playing for quite a long time. And every time I tried to role play in Tolkien's Middle Earth, things went a bit wrong. So I'll cover that at some point because I think it's full of anecdotes which I enjoy. So yeah, so that's it. So yeah, just a few thoughts. Let me just get onto the clicking button very professionally, so it doesn't look like I've done this live. So yeah, just a few thoughts. Just thought I'd just share with you. So when I haven't finished yet. What am I talking about? When I come to design a role-playing game, I am actually working on a fantasy role-playing game of my own creation, and yeah, I am going to go back to that nice and simple sort of human-centric, but there's weird stuff in the woods that you can play sort of game. So there'll be more news on that in the coming months. So I'll let you know. Anyway, thanks for listening. Ciao.